I think in the interest of justice and the poor, whom are often the biggest victims of so-called justice, we need to look for ways in hand to throttle back, throttle down on prosecutions in Hamilton County and in Chattanooga. Now, that can be done by thinking in terms of local economy, the free market, where we have the answer already in hand. We don't have to get a bill passed. We don't have to hire lobbyists to talk to Governor Haslam or get Chuck Fleischman to introduce a bill in the Congress. We don't have to, or his replacement, Dr. Mitchell. We don't have to ask her or ask him to get a bill passed in Congress. The solution is here. It simply is using what we have in hand, using the people we have in hand, and gaining strength from ideas or from existing laws. Now, that is to say that there is a reform that's possible, and we can cut back on prosecutions by 80% or 90% today. But it's in the hands of Judge Tom Greenholz, Dan Poole, also criminal court judge, and Barry Steelman, and also in the inferior courts of our city. Those are the city courts, municipal courts in the cities such as Saudi Daisy. There's one in East Ridge, and also in Red Bank. You have these corporation courts that handle mostly traffic and offenses of ordinances. So in these courts, they are criminal matters, and so if they're criminal in matter, they must meet an important requirement that comes out of the scriptures. And here we have a point that I want to just recommend to you, my listener. If you have a Christian friend, ask that Christian friend about this issue. Okay, this issue is a reform that can be brought about by the judges who simply insist on the statute that requires a culpable mental state for every criminal accusation. In other words, don't bring a case before me for trial if you're not going to allege intent and prove intent. If you bring a case before me where you're not going to try to prove intent, then I'm not going to hear it. That's what the judges need to say, and that will solve our multi-million-dollar jail crowding crisis, and it will honor the law, and it will help the poor. And I say the poor, it will help everybody because we have an endless array of prosecutions in criminal matters. And this is David Tulis, and caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind? And we are here, David Tulis. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949 if you want to get on the show. It is a talk show, after all, and we're glad to hear from you. And no, you're not interrupting me. Or maybe I should say, yes, you are interrupting me, but that's okay. You can do that. And we can talk about the thing I have in view tomorrow or the next day, right? There's always another edition of the David Tulis program, and I'm glad to delay anything I have to say for your benefit. And what we have in view here is, in the jail crowding crisis, is something that Victor Miller, a Democrat running for sheriff, and also Jim Hammond, the incumbent seeking re-election, will deal with, and that is the cash bail crisis, which is only becoming visible, I think, thanks to YouTube and the Black Lives Matter argument against police abuse, the one that Colin Kaepernick is complaining about. And that is, he's not against the American flag or anything like that. He's simply complaining about abuse by cops of black people and the poor. That's his argument. And he's somehow, his argument's been transmogrified as being somehow unpatriotic. Well, that's not the case. And the issue is, we can see the issue in the numbers in Hamilton County, and that would be the jail numbers and those imprisoned, or jailed, I should say, at Silverdale Correctional Facility in Brainerd. There are 482 people in the jail by the last numbers I have, and of those, 318 are pretrial. That is to say, not convicted of anything, and yet they can't get out. They can't get out because they can't afford to get out. They're too poor, no family there to bail them out, not money to pay the fee or to pay the whole bail amount. Though they're local, they have local families, local jobs, local connections. They're still behind $3,000 or $4,000, $5,000 bond, perhaps carelessly heaped upon them, and they're burdened down. They can't get out from under that pile, that demand. Silverdale has 901 inmates, and of those, a third, 359, are not convicted of anything. Right? They're in jail, but they're not guilty. They're innocent people in jail. That's a third of the number. And at the dump downtown on the Walnut Street jail, there are 66%, a two-thirds, which is the national average. Two-thirds are unconvicted. They've not been convicted, and yet they can't get out. And so the pressure on compromise, the pressure to plead guilty in the state-run police industrial complex here is great, and many simply plead. Many people plead at the behest of the state's people mover, which is to say the public defender's office, which is a kind of a plea bargain mill just to get people out of the system, get them out of the system, get them locked in the system for life, right? That's what happens when you have a conviction for assault or battery or theft or traffic violations. Just plead guilty, and then you have a guilty mark on your life for until you go into the grave. And even then, if someone looks up your record after your death, oh, this man was convicted, right? He's guilty of this and this and this. And he pleaded guilty simply because he had to get out. He had a life to live. His family was waiting for him. He'd lost his job by being in the jail for 10 days, 20 days, 30 days, lost job, lost all prospect, and now is just ruins. He walks out ruined without money, and we have a problem. The problem is dealt with partly by the idea of a mental health court that Judge Poole is involved in, and Lila Statham, the Sessions Court judge, and that's an interesting development, a kind of back end deflation of the problem. But the front end deflation of the problem of over policing, over criminalization, is simply to honor Title 39-11-301, and that's the headline on that statute is requirement for culpable mental state. In other words, the prosecutor has to prove that you're intended to break the law, right? You intended to bring about the result of the law break. You intended to bring about an actual violation, either you intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal negligence acted with respect to the elements, each element, right? Not just the elements in some, but each element of the offense. So if there's an offense, there have to be elements, and there has to be proof made of intent, culpable mental state. And that argument comes out of the Word of God, by the way, and no one thinks about that, but it is a Christian argument. And so my argument is to you: ask your Christian friend if he has thought about this. It comes out of the flying axe head provisions in the book of Deuteronomy, I think chapter 4, maybe chapter 5, and making the distinction between murder, which is intentional killing, and manslaughter, which is accidental killing. Right? There is there's no blood price to be paid. You face capital punishment for murder, and for the other, there is a blood price to be paid, and that can be compensation for the victim and his family. Right? The survivors of a death that's accidental receive compensation overseen by the courts. The court has a duty to make things right. The Bible is very, very, very victims' rights oriented. It's all about the victim, and there is no prison system, by the way, in the Christian biblical jurisprudence. It does not exist there at all. So what we have here, though, is we have prisons, we have jails, and we have police, all of which are either extra biblical or extra constitutional. I'd say that probably policing is not constitutional per se, but in any way, we have the executive state, and it is as Alex Vitale mentions in the book I'm reading. It is called The End of Policing. I'm holding up my copy here. It's a review copy that Alex was good enough to send me. He's a liberal sociologist out of New York, but he's making an analysis. I can see his liberal biases pretty easily, but nonetheless, he's making some remarkable insights that, in many ways, affirm my own. Right? He's giving his expansive reading of the literature, confirming my own analyses at many points, and he's giving expression to things that I've seen that I hadn't quite put words to, which is a special note. But getting back to this whole question about mens rea, intent is important in a crime, and if the judges honor this requirement for culpable mental state, we cut back on policing. Right? If the officer is told, look, don't arrest somebody unless you are prepared to argue intent and prepared to show evidence of intent, that's a very high burden on a police officer or a sheriff's deputy. And the number here is 800-8949, 800-8949. And caller, you're live on the David Tulis Show. What is on your mind?
As always, David, you bring up phenomenal topics. I'm still curious as to where any city believes they can actually effect a criminal arrest without because they're a municipal corporation. They're not really the state. Without taking that person directly to the magistrate. In other words, I don't know that they have more powers than you and me making a citizen arrest, and we would take them right to the magistrate. I don't know how the city thinks they can prosecute any crime and or put anybody in jail. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but that's not why I called. I called because it's obvious, and I'm a student of the Constitution and history, that the Constitution was written for a Christian, godly people. The founder said that. If you're not a Christian, and it's tolerant of other religions, even all the wrong religions, it's tolerant of. However, if you're not Christian and godly, I don't know how one can take an oath, because the Constitution acts on one believing in a supreme being and adhering to their oath. If you don't like our Knowles here, who thinks he can marry 2 boys and 2 girls, he didn't adhere to an oath.
Bill Knowles.
Similar to why the police have to be honest and not lie, as they almost always do on the witness stand or in signing affidavits. If you don't believe in a supreme being, you're going to be held accountable, then the Constitution's worthless. Ask any attorney what the government can't do. He can't answer you. I've asked attorneys that. What can't the government do? He can't answer that. Well, if the government can do anything, let's just throw away this document that is supposed to restrict the power of man and government. And just always remember, that's my document. That's not Knowles. That's not Bush's. It's not Trump's. That Constitution is my document. That's my birthright, because it says, we the people of the United States. That's the document we gave elected individuals and our higher individuals to live under, to be bound by. That's my document that I've hired people under. And every single one that collects a check from the government is my employee and is bound by that.
Go ahead. I'm listening.
Now, that's my thoughts.
Well, I think somehow that you're very idealistic, Mike. And this is David Tulis. We're talking with Confederate Mike. I think you're very idealistic.
Remember, it's the law. I'm not giving an opinion. This is the law.
Well, somehow there's grown up behind government and enmeshed with government and intermingled and interpenetrated with government is the state. And the state is a religious corporation that views its own self as sovereign, and which effectively replaces God and claims all the 3 great powers of God, which would be omniscience, all-knowingness, omnipotence, all power, and omnipresence, all present. And that, of course, God has these attributes.
You're saying the state as this entity that's just this entity that constantly grows and has no its tentacles everywhere. The state's not that.
Well,
the state has powers that are limited, and they have specific powers under Article 1, Section 10 that are denied. The state can't just do whatever it wants.
Well, in practice, though, Mike, it does. And so what has to happen is
affecting health, safety, and welfare. I mean, it can't coin money, but it can enforce contracts in gold and silver.
Well, look, I understand what you're saying, and the only way to rein in the state is to be a belligerent claimant in person and either sue as plaintiff for an abuse of one's rights by a state actor, or to be a defendant.
Right, David. You have to be belligerent claimants in person. I was watching a show the other night where the police came to a house. They thought the couple was fighting. They weren't. And the guy just didn't shut the door. He came outside. They arrested him. It's like, if you don't have a warrant, you're not coming in my house. You're not going to sniff my underwear to find a reason to arrest me. I'm going to go back to and I'm not anti-cop. I'm anti the system that puts police in this position, that the police pull you over and look for a reason to arrest you. It's not supposed to be that way in this republic. In this republic, the way it's supposed to work is a crime has been committed and they search for the person that committed the crime. And as another axiom we forgot, I'd rather 99 guilty people go free than one innocent man go to jail. We've lost that. And by the way, David, great job on the sky striping. I think because of you and other people, it's diminished. I'd like to know how much, maybe 40, 50%. I've never seen brighter skies in Chattanooga. Coal ash in the air destroys the environment. These are very evil people we're dealing with in positions of power, and it's about time America wake up. And if it wasn't for guys like you, they wouldn't be waking up.
Look, I think you're overstating the value of any one reporter or journalist, and that is, I do, by the way, you, my listener, know that I do cover that topic. I call it sky striping just to be neutral. People who call it chemtrailing are raising red flags, and they sound like they're conspirators, right?
Oh, David, I think it's a cumulative effect with you and other people, but I'm going to change subjects very briefly.
Go ahead.
I couldn't figure out why they were using coal ash until I read an article on some volcanic eruption overseas, nothing related to chemtrailing, that talked about how coal ash blocks out the sun, and in that area reduced the temperature 10 degrees, and it hit me. And then it hit me. It was like when David Tulis interviews experts about using coal ash and sky striping with these airplanes chemtrailing overhead, now it makes sense that this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to mimic volcanic eruptions.
Well, you're right. And I think scientists saw that very, very pointedly in the late 1990s when Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines blew up. It lowered the global temperatures, I think, 1.5 degrees. Right. And so they all said, wow, look, can we do that by our mighty force of arms?
Please, I want people to keep in mind, these people are no different than you and me, these goofballs that come up with these ideas. Remember, these are the same people that set off nuclear explosions in the upper atmosphere. Many thousands of nuclear tests. Going to blow a hole in the ozone layer. These are not very smart people. So don't think because they have a degree or work for government they're smarter than you. They're not. They're very dangerous, and they need to be reined in. And only you can do that by saying no and demanding of your congressman answers and not accepting political answers, but real answers.
Well, Mike, I think you're pointing to a spelling error that my listener and I, too, have been making, and that is we misspell a very short word. It has 2 letters. One's a consonant and one's a vowel, and the consonant is the letter N and the vowel is the letter O. We keep saying on, let's get on with it, and let's get on the bandwagon. Let's get on the gravy train. But you're saying, let's spell it correctly. It's no, N-O. And if we say no to these free things, no to supervision, no to protections and things like that, no to the good people saving the planet by sky striping, then I think we can really make ourselves more independent and freer and maybe more prosperous here in Chattanooga, Mike. Well, I think Mike agrees with me on that point. And
I do. And just remember, the system requires 3 things of you: your time, your money, and your obedience. And if you give those 3 things, you're truly not free and don't have liberty. Just remember that.
Well, great. Thanks. This is David Tulis, and I want just to let you know there's an important appeal being filed today in God's Providence in the Arthur J. Hirsch case, a case we followed in detail, and that is regarding the right to travel and the right to be free of an unconstitutionally vague statute. And that statute is the gun statute in Tennessee, which is a racist law. It is a racist law that kept getting tightened down, caused by the Nat Turner Rebellion in Virginia in the 1830s. And the Tennesseans said, we can't have black people armed. And so what we have is a statute that is incomprehensible and vague and inarticulate, and it's impossible to obey. You really don't know if you can obey it. And it seems to contradict entirely the right to bear arms because it is a total gun ban in Tennessee. But there are exceptions, and these exceptions are muzzy and vague. For example, the 2014 exception allowing you to have a gun in your car. Well, it has to be a motor vehicle, and you have to own it. So what if you lend your car to someone and you have a handgun under the seat or handgun in the glove box? Well, you suddenly have created a trap for the person borrowing that car. Or what if it's your gun, you're borrowing a car and it's your gun, but you happen not to own the car, you're just borrowing it, and you're trapped, right? You're trapped. It's unconstitutionally vague, and it's simply wrong. That statute's being challenged by Arthur Hirsch. He is the fiddleman of Lawrence County, that's Middle Tennessee, and we've covered his you might say his exploits, his criminal convictions for exercising constitutional rights, the right to bear arms, 1, in his self-defense, and then number 2, the right to use the public right-of-way, the highway, privately in his own personal conveyance, that is to say, his car. And the issue there is, can the state control all use of the roads or only the part that is involved in transportation? And that is the answer. The answer to that is yes, it can control the transportation part, but not all. And so the Mexicans in Hamilton County and Chattanooga, they're going to get some protection if the court decides with Arthur Hirsch that, in fact, the state's regulatory apparatus restricts and controls traffic and transportation only, but not private travel for pleasure. That's what the argument being made is that private people don't have to ask permission to use the public right-of-way, which is to say the people's roads in their private conveyance, which would be a car or truck or motorbike. So there's a defense on that of that whole sector, which is effectively outlawed by the 1939 and earlier statutes that gave rise to the regulatory state against transportation, bringing transportation into regulation of national. So that's an appeal being filed today. It has to be postmarked today. The defendant tells me, this is David Tulis, brought to you by Nooganomics.com. This is the website for the man who matters, right? And that's Nooganomics.com. Subscribe today. Be a subscriber. Be in the know, right? This is the deep state, if there is one, the deep state analysis of Tennessee, Chattanooga, and the route to free markets and local economy in Chattanooga and beyond. David Tulis.
Traffic, news, and information. Nooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3.